During the Three Kingdoms period in 266, the Sima family, which had controlled politics in the state of Cao Wei for the previous 15 years, usurped the throne and established the Jin dynasty. 14 years later, the Jin dynasty conquered the southern state of Wu, known in history as Eastern Wu, unifying China after almost a century of division. Unfortunately, this first period of the Jin dynasty, known in history as the Western Jin dynasty, was very unstable from the start and ruled over a unified China for only 2 decades before things fell apart due to civil wars and barbarian attacks. So in this video, let us explore these short, chaotic, but highly consequential decades of Chinese history. A recurring theme during this time period was the fortunes of the great houses of Confucian scholar gentries. Previously, during the almost 2 centuries of peace under the Eastern Han dynasty, young men with Confucian education were selected for high-ranking government positions based on recommendations from the local governors, who were tasked with evaluating up-and-coming talents. But during a time when books were scarce and personal connections mattered a great deal, it became easy for families that were already producing government officials to keep on doing so. And over time, these families amassed huge amounts of wealth and influence, and, as a collective whole, began to dominate political power in China. They formed an elite class in society, like the senators of ancient Rome or the nobles of medieval Europe. The fall of the Eastern Han dynasty was catastrophic for these powerful houses. Many of their members were massacred, with the survivors often forced to flee far from their homelands, away from the wealth, dependent populations, and personal connections they had relied on for power. Things only got worse for them after the warlord Cao Cao conquered northern China. Cao Cao was an outsider. His father was the adopted son of an eunuch, and so he distrusted the powerful houses, mostly excluding their members from power, while readily purging those who stepped out of line. Many of the local governors appointed by Cao Cao were also military people who lacked the education to properly evaluate candidates for civilian government, further excluding these elites from power. As peace returned to northern China, the Cao family faced a recruitment crisis trying to get talented elites to serve in its government. To mitigate this issue, Cao Cao's successor Cao Pi, after establishing the Cao Wei dynasty in 220, introduced what became known as the 9-rank system that would play a major role in Chinese politics over the next few centuries. Under this system, candidates were much more systematically evaluated on a 9-point scale based on a combination of their competency and family background. As much as the Cao Wei government would have liked to exclude the powerful families from power, they realized that without fully objective ways to evaluate talent, a strong family name still helped to ensure that a candidate offered at least a baseline level of competency. The scores mattered a lot. For example, a 2nd rank versus a 6th rank had very different floors and ceilings to their career prospects. Even though Cao Wei managed to incorporate more and more elites into its government through the 9-rank system, they were still viewed with suspicion, and the Cao Wei government still preferred to rely on nepotism from within the family instead. And so, as the collective powers of the elites returned after several generations of peace in northern China, they increasingly resented Cao Wei rule. In 249, when the politician Sima Yi, who came from one of these elite families, staged a coup, he succeeded largely with the backing of the other elite families. But despite now controlling the government, the Sima family still had little political legitimacy to govern, which mattered a great deal in ancient Chinese politics. To maintain its rule, the Sima family was forced to adopt an exaggerated carrot-and-stick approach towards the elites. It granted special privileges to supporters while brutally purging potential rivals. The political climate became increasingly treacherous, and being an elite meant both enjoying special privileges but also risking being purged at any moment if they backed the wrong horse. But the privileges were many. Laws that governed things like accumulating property or mistreatment of slaves were relaxed, so the elites lorded over the lower classes much more than they typically did in ancient China. And a 9-rank system based heavily on merit? No, it was now mostly about the family name. A mediocre member of a powerful family like the Hongnong Yang or the Langya Huang will automatically be ranked higher than a prodigy from a lesser family. As long as the powerful houses tolerated Sima rule, just about anything else would fly. Besides the persistent outside threat from the powerful houses, the Sima family also soon became embroiled in a succession crisis from within. Sima Shi, the eldest son of Sima Yi, was a charismatic and ruthless politician and very much seen as the future of the family, but did not have any sons. Sima Zhao, his younger brother, had multiple sons, including the oldest Sima Yan and the younger Sima You. And so, as part of a common traditional Chinese custom, the baby Sima You was adopted by Sima Shi to be his heir. The Sima family tree now looked like this. Sima Shi took over the family business in 251 and continued to expand the family's power, but died unexpectedly in 255 from complications after a surgery done to remove a tumor growing next to one of his eyes. This tumor altered the course of Chinese history. Sima You was too young to take power, and so it went to Sima Zhao, legally his uncle, but biologically his father. Over time, the question of whether Sima Yan or Sima You should succeed Sima Zhao became a growing concern. To further complicate matters, both grew up to become competent, ambitious adults backed by factions of powerful families, and Sima Zhao tried his best to procrastinate on the issue. Even though Sima Yan was eventually chosen to be the heir, it was anything but a clear-cut decision. Sima Yan succeeded Sima Zhao in 265, and the following year usurped the throne of Cao Wei to establish the Jin dynasty, and became posthumously known as Emperor Wu of Jin. To secure the power of his family against the other houses, Emperor Wu overcompensated by ennobling 27 members of the imperial family as princes, a ridiculously high number by ancient Chinese standards. Sima You, now the Prince of Qi, became one of the most powerful politicians in the empire. Tension soon mounted between the emperor and the Prince of Qi, again over succession. Emperor Wu was married to a member of the Yang clan of Hongnong, one of the most prominent families in China. Ideally for the Yang family, the throne would pass to Sima Zhong, the crown prince, at which point its members, as part of the consortkins, could control the government. But there was one issue with this plan. The crown prince had a developmental delay and was mentally unfit to be emperor. Powerful factions at court backed the Prince of Qi to succeed the throne, especially since he had already been overlooked once. Emperor Wu again overcompensated, this time to strengthen the crown prince's claim to power. He forged a political marriage between the crown prince and Jia Nanfeng, daughter of Jia Chong, one of the chief power brokers in the empire. He also ennobled even more princes to help serve as additional counterweights to the Prince of Qi faction. In 280, the Jin dynasty conquered the state of Eastern Wu to unify China. Now without an external enemy to focus on, the power struggles at court reached even higher levels. In 283, Emperor Wu made a decisive move against the Prince of Qi by ordering him to return to his fief. A huge fight broke out at court, with many powerful ministers opposing the move. Amidst all this, the Prince of Qi suddenly fell ill and died. The circumstances of his death were suspicious, even if there was no direct evidence of foul play. Despite having the Prince of Qi now out of the political picture, Emperor Wu continued to strengthen the imperial family against the other powerful houses by giving the princes growing amounts of privileges. They were given generous-sized fiefs, and within their fiefs they had the power to appoint their own officials and raise their own armies. Emperor Wu even went as far as abolishing most of the regular armies not under the control of the princes. This made it nearly impossible for the local governors, who mostly came from the powerful families, to challenge the emperor's authority. But members of the imperial family now had more power than during just about any other period in Chinese history. The emperor was now the only one left who could keep their powers in check, and if the emperor were to be weak, chaos could easily ensue. In addition to the political turmoil during this time, a tremendous amount of societal changes were also taking place. The centuries of Han Dynasty rule had been a golden age for Confucianism, with its emphasis on building a society bound by personal virtues and under the leadership of a class of elites actively involved in politics. But as society collapsed with the fall of the Han Dynasty and participation in politics became more treacherous under the Cao and Sima families, they began to reinterpret Confucianism through the lens of other philosophies, especially Taoism, with its emphasis on individualism and escapism. This developed into a new school of philosophy that combined elements of Confucianism and Taoism. It was known as Xuanxue, roughly translated as learning in the profound. For some, the fresh perspectives offered by Xuanxue could provide innovative ideas to rebuild society, whereas for others they offered escape from the challenges of daily life. A pioneer of Xuanxue was Wang Bi, a child prodigy who sadly died of an infectious disease at only 23 years old, but in his very short life wrote commentaries on the Yi Jing and the Dao De Jing that are still critical to the study of these texts to this day. Another pioneer was Xiang Xiu, who heavily influenced the study of the other major Taoist text, Zhuangzi. Xiang Xiu belonged to a group of friends in the mid-200s collectively known as the Seven Sages of the Bamboo Forest. Instead of participating in treacherous court politics, they chose to live simple lives in the countryside, writing poems, making music, and discussing philosophy. They frequently eschewed social etiquettes, all while drinking copious amounts of alcohol and taking a popular psychoactive drug, 50散, or literally the 5 minerals powder, a highly toxic stimulant made up of a mixture of crushed minerals, some of which contained arsenic. The seven sages were idealized by later generations as rebels who tried to live idealistic lives in a collapsing society, but even they could not escape forever from the real world. Some of them eventually accepted comfortable government positions, while others held on to their opposition to the Sima family, causing one of them, Ji Kang, to be eventually executed for this. As part of the study of Xuanxue, the seven sages, among many others, participated in debates known as Qingtan, roughly translated as pure conversations, because instead of discussing worldly topics such as court politics or the plight of the peasants, they discussed abstract ideas such as philosophy. Xuanxue and Qingtan will greatly contribute to the development of Chinese philosophy and help to pave the way for the rise of Buddhism in China a few centuries later. But over time, Qingtan evolved from low-key philosophical discussions into public spectacles involving large numbers of the ruling elites. Participation in Qingtan increasingly became a status symbol, and the discussions grew increasingly vapid. Opportunists exploited Qingtan as an expedient to achieve their 15 minutes of fame, used the reputation boost to leverage higher scores on the 9-rank system, and then enrich themselves from the ensuing government jobs. As political order collapsed over the next few decades, many elites of the time came to blame their own participation in Qingtan as a major reason for this. The rationale was that instead of focusing their energy on pressing social and political concerns, they idled their time away talking about nothing. Now, it is probably unfair to pin philosophical discussions as the cause of a society's collapse, and perhaps doing so allowed these elites to explain away their failures in the upcoming debacle without having to dig even deeper for answers. But it certainly was not ideal when, let's say, at meetings to discuss the latest bad harvest, a huge amount of time was instead wasted on arguing over the nature of reality in an ephemeral world. And as this pattern of behavior repeated itself across all levels of government, it was only natural for things to operate more inefficiently. Many elites, while publicly espousing Xuanxue ideals through Qingtan, continued to live conspicuously decadent lives. The most notorious example involved two elites named Shi Chong and Wang Kai, who publicly competed to show off their wealth. When Wang Kai ordered his servants to clean pots with sugar water, Shi Chong ordered his servants to burn candles as firewood. Emperor Wu favored Wang Kai and one time gifted him a very expensive coral tree. As Wang Kai smugly showed off this gift to his gathered guests, Shi Chong walked up and smashed the coral tree to pieces in front of shocked faces. He then ordered his servants to bring over several coral trees, all much more magnificent than the one he had just destroyed, telling Wang Kai to have his pick. With his brother-cousin now out of the political picture, Emperor Wu spent the last years of his life heavily womanizing. Court politics worsened as factions fought one another for influence. As traditional historians commented, politics in the Western Jin dynasty already behaved like that of an aging dynasty on the verge of collapse. Emperor Wu died in 290, and the crown prince, known posthumously as Emperor Hui of the Jin dynasty, succeeded to the throne, with regency power now held by Yang Jun, the emperor's maternal grandfather. He was opposed by Empress Jia along with members of the Sima family. What happened next was one of the most chaotic episodes in Chinese history, the War of the Eight Princes, although the Chinese name is better translated as the Disorder of the Eight Princes, since much of it involved political maneuvering and not open warfare. In 291, Empress Jia, along with the Prince of Runan, the great-uncle of the emperor, and the Prince of Chu, the younger brother of the emperor, staged a coup to remove Yang Jun from power, executing him and thousands of his supporters and their families in the process. Tensions soon mounted between the princes of Runan and Chu. Empress Jia colluded with the Prince of Chu to overthrow and execute the Prince of Runan. She then accused the Prince of Chu of treason and also had him executed. Empress Jia now controlled the government. She was much vilified by traditional historians as jealous, cruel, and manipulative. Some of this may have been true, whereas others may have been exaggerations born out of a combination of sexism and a general distrust of consortkins. But with that said, she did appoint scrupulous ministers to important roles, resulting in 9 years of general peace. The emperor remained unfit to rule. According to one famous story, when he heard reports that peasants were starving due to a lack of grain, he asked, "Why don't they eat meat?" This became the Chinese equivalent of "let them eat cake." But gradually, tensions worsened between Empress Jia and the crown prince, who was the son of a concubine. In 299, Empress Jia got the crown prince very drunk and had him write a statement denouncing the emperor. The crown prince was then deposed. As popular sentiment turned against Empress Jia over this, an elder member of the imperial family, the Prince of Zhao, convinced Empress Jia to murder the crown prince. The Prince of Zhao then launched an investigation into the death of the deposed crown prince and eventually executed Empress Jia along with her supporters. The following year, the Prince of Zhao deposed Emperor Hui and declared himself as emperor. He relied heavily on ambitious, unscrupulous ministers to run the government. These men, in turn, did all they could to enrich themselves, massacring their personal enemies while awarding high government positions to supporters. So many positions were handed out that the capital city at Luoyang ran out of mink tails used to decorate the hats of high-ranking officials, and so dog tails were used instead, giving rise to a famous Chinese idiom meaning essentially that the sequel is not as good as the original. The chaos in the capital led to 3 more princes, the princes of Hejian, Chengdu, and Qi, the son of Emperor Wu's brother cousin, to march onto the capital in 301. The Prince of Zhao was deposed and executed along with his supporters, and Emperor Hui was restored to the throne. The Prince of Qi now held regency powers in the capital, but he, too, became corrupted. The Prince of Chengdu successfully plotted with the Prince of Changsha, stationed near the capital with an army, to depose and execute the Prince of Qi in 302. The Prince of Changsha initially deferred to the Prince of Chengdu, based out of Ye, one of the largest cities in China. But as the Prince of Changsha became more independent-minded, the Prince of Chengdu and Hejian again allied against him and attacked Luoyang. The Prince of Changsha led a brave defense and, against heavy odds, won multiple victories. But at a critical juncture, he was betrayed by another prince, the Prince of Donghai, who delivered him to Zhang Fang, one of the Prince of Hejian's main generals. Zhang Fang was known for his cruelty and ordered the Prince of Changsha burned to death. The Prince of Changsha was one of the few bright spots during this dark period, and perhaps one of the few people capable of reestablishing peace had he not met his end so quickly. Zhang Fang's cruelty did not end there. As his armies marched back towards Chang'an, it ran out of food, and to stretch his supplies, Zhang Fang reportedly ordered his soldiers to engage in cannibalism by mixing human flesh with the meat of animals. The Prince of Chengdu was declared the crown prince and returned to Ye, again trying to control Luoyang remotely from there. The people in Luoyang grew tired of his antics and rallied under the Prince of Donghai, who marched onto Ye with the emperor. Their army was routed, and the emperor was captured and brought as a hostage to Ye. Wang Jun, a warlord who controlled You province centered around modern-day Beijing, also marched against Ye. The army of Wang Jun consisted of a large number of auxiliaries from the Xianbei, one of many barbarian groups living in China at the time. And so before continuing with the narrative, it is important that we discuss how these groups ended up in China. First, there was the Xiongnu, often associated with the Huns that invaded the Roman Empire in the 400s AD, although this link has now largely been disproven. They had been a menace to the Han dynasty during the 2nd and 1st centuries BC, but were permanently defeated during the 1st century AD, after which many of them were settled in the border territories inside the Great Wall. They migrated further inland during the fall of the Han dynasty in the late 100s to early 200s, but were defeated by Cao Cao, who appointed Chinese inspectors to supervise them. Nonetheless, by the year 300, the Xiongnu had been living in Chinese territory for a quarter of a millennium. A number of Xiongnu nobles adopted Liu, the family name of the Han dynasty emperors, as their own, because their ancestors had married Han dynasty princesses. They were already partially Sinicized, and in many parts of Bing province, which corresponded mostly to modern-day Shanxi province, Xiongnu and Han Chinese communities were interspersed among one another. Another tribe, the Jie, was closely allied with the Xiongnu. Their exact origins are still murky, although they may have migrated to China from much deeper in Central Asia than the Xiongnu did, and were described to have had more Caucasian features such as high noses and thick beards. Further to the north and east was the Xianbei, a loose confederation of tribes that migrated into Xiongnu lands on the steppes after the Xiongnu had been defeated, but over time they also began migrating into northern China. The Xianbei were divided into many tribes that typically acted on their own, and some of the most important Xianbei tribes in Chinese politics during this period included the Murong, Yuwen, Duan, and Tuoba Xianbei. The Qiang originated in the Tibetan Plateau and migrated east during the Han Dynasty, fighting many wars against the Eastern Han Dynasty throughout the century of the 100s AD and serving as a secondary cause of the dynasty's collapse. In the 200s, they migrated even further into the heart of China, including the Eastern Wei River Valley near Chang'an. The Di were closely related to the Qiang, but settled in more mountainous areas, built their lives around agriculture, and were much more Sinicized than the Qiang. One group of Di was forcibly resettled by Cao Cao in the western Wei River Valley, where it was firmly established by the year 300. As a result of these migrations, large parts of northern China, including lands near the cities of Luoyang, Chang'an, and Ye, were heavily settled by barbarians. Many Western Jin dynasty officials were beginning to feel alarmed by this development and proposed various solutions, including extreme and impractical measures such as deporting them back to the border regions. But given the chaos around the Jin court, the issue was largely ignored. Now, returning to the year 304, as the warlord Wang Jun marched onto Ye with a large contingent of Xianbei auxiliaries, the Prince of Chengdu sent one of his subordinates, a prominent Xiongnu noble named Liu Yuan, home to recruit an army. But after returning to Xiongnu territory, Liu Yuan abandoned the Prince of Chengdu's cause and rallied the Xiongnu under his own banner. The army of Wang Jun brutally sacked Ye, and the Xianbei returned home with large numbers of kidnapped women. When Wang Jun found out about the situation, he ordered the execution of any Xianbei caught with a kidnapped woman. Up to 8,000 bodies were subsequently found drowned in a nearby river. The Prince of Chengdu fled to Luoyang with the emperor, but without an army, he was deposed as crown prince by his previous ally, the Prince of Hejian, whose army under Zhang Fang looted Luoyang and then brought the emperor to Chang'an. In 305, the Prince of Donghai raised another army from near his fief in the far east, rallied forces from across the empire to his cause, and marched against Chang'an. As the allied army approached in 306, people convinced the Prince of Hejian that if he were to kill Zhang Fang, then the Prince of Donghai would make peace. Zhang Fang was subsequently assassinated. Bad idea. The Prince of Donghai did not make peace, and the Prince of Hejian was not without his right-hand man. Chang'an was sacked, again by Xianbei auxiliaries, and the emperor was brought back to Luoyang. The princes of Hejian and Chengdu were both killed in the ensuing chaos. The Prince of Donghai now emerged as the last standing in the disorder of the 8 princes. Later that year, he poisoned Emperor Hui to install a new puppet emperor, Emperor Huai, onto the throne. But even though he now controlled the capital, political order was falling apart in much of China outside of the capital. In the north, Liu Yuan had been bringing together a hodgepodge collection of Xiongnu, Jie, Xianbei, and Han Chinese groups under his leadership, eventually declaring himself emperor in 308. To give himself legitimacy, he named his dynasty the Han Dynasty, especially since Liu Yuan himself claimed descent from the Han Dynasty emperors anyway. His son, however, later changed the name to Zhao, and so the dynasty became known in history as Han Zhao, or former Zhao. In the west, the Qiang and Di launched their own rebellions, eventually leading to the formation of a Di state in southwestern China in 304, known in history as Chenghan. There were also rebellions in the Yangtze River Delta, which had only recently been conquered from eastern Wu. The local elites there, who already resented Jin dynasty rule, were becoming restless. To salvage the rapidly deteriorating situation, the Prince of Donghai sent a close ally, the Prince of Langya, to the former capital of eastern Wu at Jianye, modern-day Nanjing. The Prince of Langya initially had trouble getting the collaboration of the local southern elites, who saw him as an occupier from the north. It was only through the diligent mediation of 2 ministers from the Wang clan of Langya, the cousins Wang Dao and Wang Dun, that the Prince of Langya was able to gain some level of cooperation from the southern elites. In turn, Wang Dao and Wang Dun became the main power brokers in Jianye, with the Prince of Langya just a figurehead. In the north, the Prince of Donghai appointed a magistrate named Liu Kun as the inspector of Bing province, mostly under Han Zhao occupation. Leading a small band of followers, Liu Kun reoccupied the provincial seat of Bing province at Jinyang, modern-day Taiyuan, and from there recruited refugees from across northern China to his cause. To resist the frequent incursions from Han Zhao, Liu Kun allied closely with the Tuoba Xianbei to his north, whose chief was eventually ennobled by the Jin dynasty as the Duke of Dai, leading to the formation of the Tuoba Xianbei barbarian state of Dai. To the northeast of Liu Kun was the warlord Wang Jun, who controlled You province, and his close allies, the Duan Xianbei. Altogether, the forces of Han Zhao, Liu Kun, Wang Jun, the various Xianbei tribes, and a vagrant militia known as the Qihuo army, or literally the Beggar's army, maneuvered against one another in a song and dance across the far north. In 311, the Prince of Donghai led an army of over 100,000 strong out of Luoyang to force an engagement against Shile, a member of the Jie barbarians and one of the most prominent Han Zhao generals. The Prince of Donghai died of illness in camp. His army splintered, and many of the ministers at camp, not knowing what to do, procrastinated their days away with Qingtan discussions. They were eventually massacred by Shile. Luoyang soon fell to Han Zhao with minimal resistance. The city was sacked, its palaces burned to the ground, and the imperial tombs of the Jin emperors looted. 30,000 people were massacred. The sack of Luoyang was known in history as the disaster of Yongjia, with Yongjia being the era name of Emperor Huai, and has long been considered one of the most traumatic events in Chinese history. After the fall of Luoyang, a new emperor, Emperor Min, was declared in Chang'an, with large numbers of refugees fleeing to him. Still more refugees fled southeast towards Jianye, now renamed Jiankang, under the control of the Prince of Langya. To maintain stability, only a small percentage of the refugees, mostly the elites, were allowed to cross the Yangtze to safety south of the river. In this way, crossing the Yangtze became symbolic of leaving behind one's home to seek refuge in a foreign land. The bulk of the refugees stayed in temporary settlements north of the Yangtze, where they often clashed with the local populations, causing even more instability. One of the refugees who was allowed to cross the Yangtze was an official named Zhu Ti. Many years prior, Zhu Ti and Liu Kun had both been low-ranking government officials serving together, and the two quickly became close friends. One time, a nearby rooster began crowing in the early morning, and instead of going back to sleep, Zhu Ti woke up Liu Kun so that they could practice their swordsmanship with one another. This gave name to a famous Chinese idiom, practicing swordsmanship after hearing the rooster's crow, meaning to diligently push oneself, especially in the service of one's country. Both men were to eventually find plenty of use for their swordsmanship, Liu Kun as the inspector of Bing province, and Zhu Ti as the head of a band of refugees fleeing to the south. After arriving at Jiankang, Zhu Ti petitioned hard for the Prince of Langya to retake the north. He became a nuisance to the other elites who preferred the safety south of the Yangtze. In this way, crossing the Yangtze took on the additional, negative symbolism of hiding in comfort, away from fulfilling one's responsibilities. When Emperor Min asked the Prince of Langya to send help, Zhu Ti volunteered for the job. He was given no weapons or armor, and just a nominal amount of supplies. As Zhu Ti went back across the Yangtze with his followers, he tapped his bow with an oar and swore an oath that if he were to fail in retaking the Central Plains, then like the waters of the Yangtze River flowing into the sea, he would not return. This gesture has entered the Chinese consciousness as an idiom that translates to tapping the oar in the middle of the river, to describe resistance against difficult odds during times of crisis. But later romanticism aside, Zhu Ti was also quite pragmatic. The Central Plains, one of the most populated regions in China, was now a lawless area dotted with small fortifications controlled by local elites whose roles skirted the boundaries between magistrate, warlord, militia, and bandit. Zhu Ti utilized his political acumen to rally these local Han Chinese forces to his cause, slowly building up a presence in the region. In 316, Chang'an, too, was sacked by the Han Zhao army, and the emperor was taken prisoner. The following year, the Prince of Langya was declared emperor, known posthumously as Emperor Yuan. The re-established Jin dynasty ruled until 420 and is known in history as the Eastern Jin dynasty, since its capital at Jiankang was located in far eastern China. For this reason, the earlier iteration of the Jin dynasty became known as the Western Jin dynasty. In the north, Han Zhao splintered, with a Jie under Shi Le forming a separate state also named Zhao, known in history as Later Zhao. The two Zhao states existed side by side, and between them they conquered almost all of northern China. Liu Kun had been betrayed in 314, and Jinyang fell to Han Zhao. He fled to neighboring You province, now under the control of the Duan Xianbei, but was eventually murdered by his political rivals. The Duan Xianbei remained loyal vassals of the Eastern Jin dynasty until they, too, were defeated by later Zhao. Zhu Ti hung on to the last remaining Jin territory in the Central Plains and repeatedly petitioned Emperor Yuan to join him against the barbarians, but his pleas were ignored, and he was increasingly treated with suspicion. He died of illness in 321 without realizing his dream of recovering the north. Zhu Ti was succeeded by his younger brother Zhu Yue. The following year, against a new onslaught by the armies of later Zhao, and with no hope for reinforcements, Zhu Yue withdrew across the Huai River to Shouchun, a city that would serve as the bulwark against further barbarian incursions over the next century. The Central Plains, which until then had been the heart of Chinese civilization, was now fully under barbarian occupation.